Hey everyone, it's Types, and in the Pokemon TCG, 3 prizers are in some ways a big part of it, a mega part of it. Pun that was very bad, what was very intended there. But yeah, there are 3 prizes in the Pokemon TCG that are, the main mechanic of the Mega era, obviously because they are the Megas, right? The 3 prizes in the Pokemon TCG are something that Pokemon has attempted, I believe, 4 times so far, and I'm not gonna lie, I think they've done a kind of bad job all 4 times. So I want to take a look at the 4 different iterations of 3 prizes in the Pokemon TCG, talk about how they what they've done well and what they've done badly and their potential, and hopefully what Pokemon will do in the future to maybe improve them as well. I do want to say that I think Megas are the best iteration of 3 prizers so far, though I think tag teams were probably the second best. When I say best, I mean best designed, not most powerful. I do also want to mention, I don't really talk about Pocket. I'm not really going to talk about Pocket in this video, but Pocket does have Megas in it. I'd love to hear from people who are currently playing Pocket how Megas have felt. Pocket is a format with a lot less, I'll just say prize cards, there are points there, but a Mega is like, the whole game there, right? So in Pocket, I don't know how Megas feel. I'm not very familiar with the meta game. I don't really keep up with it. Yeah, Megas are pretty good as far as I'm aware, but they're not like broken. Again, I'm not very familiar with the metagame in Pocket there, though. So if you play that, tell me that down below. But obviously, in the regular Pokemon TCG, you have 6 prize cards. When you look at Pokemon in the TCG, you look at Pokemon that give up 1 prize. In this way, they are pretty simple, right? You're taking 1 prize every turn, theoretically, and then you're gonna have, or you're taking, 1 knockout at a time, right? And then that's 6 knockouts there. That's how you win. When you add 2 prizers, you then take you knock out 3 2 prizers, and if you knock out 3 2 prizers, you win. If you mix in single prizers, you could knock out. Um, you can kind of mix and match there. With 2 prizes, though, if you force your opponent to take 1 knockout on a single prizer, then they still need to knock out 3 2 prizers, forcing your opponent to take essentially 1 extra prize card. With Megas, then your Pokemon, um, if you force your opponent to take 2 prize cards somehow, and then just knock out Megas, then they need to take essentially 8 prize cards, 2 extra prize cards there. So Megas theoretically are good for that reason. On top of that, obviously Megas are cards that give up 3 prizes and need to be better. So if we take a look at Greninja, is there a card that has a Mega, an EX, and a regular in Standard? Um, I'm sure there is. I'll just look at Lucario. I don't think it's a standard single prize Lucario. Well, it's not a Luario. So we have Lucario. We don't have a single prize one in standard, but we had one that rotated last rotation. It's got 130 HP. HP isn't like the biggest thing, but it is something worth mentioning. 260 HP for the stage one, and then 340 HP for the stage two. So obviously, or sorry, for the 1 prizer, you have 130. For the 2 prizer, you have 260, and for the 3 prizer, you have 340. I misspoke there. But obviously, you have more HP when you give them more prizes and are just stronger in general, right? And that makes sense because you have a downside, but you have then an upside. However, the other thing that is very meaningful, because we see that the single prizer has half as much HP as the 2 prizer. The 3 prizer has not quite 3 times as much HP as the single prizer, but it's close-ish there. Um, it'll vary, right, depending on the Pokemon. If we look at Absol, I actually don't know if there's a single prize Absol. Oh yeah, there is. So this is under 3 times as much HP, but it's still going to be close-ish, right? So the other upside though of having a Pokemon that gives up multiple prizes is then this isn't exactly an upside, but when you think about it in actual gameplay and deck construction, it is an upside. You need to set up less, Mega Lucarios than you would single prize Lucarios. Theoretically, if you're attacking Lucario, a single prize every turn, which again doesn't exist, so in standard. Not the best example, but if you're doing something like that, you need to set up 6 of them, right? If you're setting up the EXs, you need to set up 3 of them. When I'm saying EXs, I mean non-mega EXs. Then with a 3 prizer, you need to set up just 2 of them. So that's less deck space committed to them, less recovery. You look at a single prizer, if you want to attack with it, and like for every attack and get it knocked out 6 times, you need recovery. For a 2 prizer, you're probably playing 4 copies. You'll have 1 extra there if it's prized or it gets discarded or whatever. And then with a Mega, you're not running too many copies of the Mega unless you have some other reason to do so. But in terms of just getting knocked out, it's just not that. important there. So you see that you need to spend less resources on these three prizers, and presumably they'll get knocked out less as well, which makes sense. So then you need to spend less turns setting up, or less lower portion of your turns as well setting up there. Of course, then theoretically the game will also be faster, which is a legitimate downside, right? If there are two cards that were the exact same, the one was a single prizer and the one was a three prizer, obviously the single prizer would be better. I do also want to mention the cards that give up more prizes tend to be rarer than the cards that give up less prizes, and Pokemon tends to make their rarer cards better as well. They don't necessarily have to do this. They don't always do this. There are certainly cards that are rare that are very bad, but they, often do this. Then we also need to talk about the other, because that's the context of three prices. What are the different three prices? And I imagine most of you are somewhat familiar with these, but again, there are 4 different types. I don't know if they're here on the limit list. I probably should have checked that before. But we see that the oldest ones, which really introduced the game to three prizes, were the tag teams. I believe if I click this, I will see, yes, the tag team supported as well. If you didn't know, there are tag team supporter cards. Well, they're very different. I was to say the big difference, but they're mostly different. The only similarity, though, is the fact that you can do something when you play the card. Obviously, like cards do something, and then you can spend a higher cost to do something more. But they're done in a pretty different way there. Regardless, we have the tag team Pokemon, and these cards are they are honestly very good. They're very powerful. They were overtuned. So this is the big issue with the tag team GX cards. There's some other stuff I'm not going to dive into all this stuff here. Arceus, Nalga, Palkia. Or actually, no, I'll go to Pikachu and Zekrom. No, I'll go to Reshiram and Charizard. This card, if you put it into standard, it would be not very good. Its HP is it's a little low, right? It's not like horribly low. It's a little low. Its attacks are a little weak. Flare Strike is a little expensive and it's not crazy strong. Double Blaze GX is more okay, but it is a once per game attack there. And yeah, I mean, overall, the attack teams are a little weaker than standard. They're not drastically weaker, but they are a bit weaker there. So that's because of, power creep, right? Power creep is a very meaningful thing. It's not everything. It gets over exaggerated at times, but it is somewhat meaningful there. But if we look at Team Up, the set that introduced tag teams, we look at some single prizers. Let me find one that's okay. And you see, I was gonna say Hitmonchan. Hitmonchan like did see play, but that's kind of different. Its stats look terrible compared to today, but also it's pretty different there. But you look at, for example, Incineroar GX. Incineroar GX technically kind of saw play. Is there a single prizer or sorry, a two prize GX that saw regular play? Let me find one. There aren't. I'm not gonna lie. There are not too many. Most of them are bad. The long story short, most of them are just not good. Hansko GX, sure, this one has seen play, but you look at its HP, 210 HP for a two prize stage one. Compared this to standard, it's pretty disappointing. I'd say it's more disappointing than the HP on the tag teams for the most part. And you look at its attack, and its attack's like also somewhat underwhelming. It's actually not terrible. This is a very weird card, a card I actually really don't like in expanded. Um, but regardless, this card, alongside like all the two prizers of this era, I mean, look at the HPs; they're not very impressive. 200 HP on the stage one, with just these like mediocre attacks here. Just this card actually saw play. This card had an interesting ability, but it was used for its attack as well, and it did a max of 190 for 3 colors, which is standard, not, I guess, terrible, but certainly not very good. And then it is a max, but it's something that you are really spending a lot of resources into to reach that max. And the GX attack is also just like not very good. Even if it was just like a regular attack, wouldn't be very impressive. So long story short, the tag teams were a lot better than the two prizers and the single prizers as well. The single prizers, as far as I'm aware at this time, were just like not good, unless I'm forgetting something. I think there are some that were okay and some that had good support, like Mew and stuff. But in terms of main attackers, I think they were pretty bad. Outside of, I guess, Blacephalon. Blacephalon is pretty interesting as like a very all-in big damage attacker there. But when you look at like random single prizers, they're just not very good. Like this card This card is actually pretty funny though. I do want to show it off. Which, if you flip three tails, you do lose the game. That is funny. But regardless, these cards are kind of bad. So the three prizers were just drastically better than the two prizers, except for some support abilities were very good. But then when we look at the three prizers, let's go back to them. Speaking of support abilities, the two prizers didn't really have like any, or the three prizers had like no support abilities. And as we'll take a look at three prizers, they are pretty terrible support Pokemon. They're pretty much all main attackers. This is the biggest issue with these cards. When we look at cards with abilities here, Mew has an ability, but it lets you attack. And then we have an ability on Venusaur and Snivy GX. This is, it lets you, was it? Oh yeah, you like Gust when you attach. It's like kind of cool, but it's not super good. And then you also have an ability on Nightingale and Guzzlord. This hasn't, as far as I'm aware, really seen players for its ability at all. I played with this card some. It's actually pretty good, specifically in Expanded, but its ability is not very impressive. And then, is that it? Yeah, that's it. So I'm pretty sure, unless I'm missing some. So yeah, those are all the abilities on the three prizes. That's it, right? And again, a lot of these cards were legitimately good, and even expanded, some are still legitimately good, and they are not good support cards. When you look at the good cards in standard, when you look at, we'll just pull up some different decks. We'll pull up Dragapult. See the Pokemon are, there's a lot of ability. Okay, well, let me find a deck that plays. Let me actually find like basic box. I feel like that. Sure, Ogerpon box. That'll do. That'll do. When we look at this deck, we see that the different Pokemon, most are like a good chunk are there for abilities, right? There are some different attacking options, some that do a bit of both, but you see Ogerpon EX itself, mostly there for the ability. Assuming out the X, obviously only there for the ability, really. Latias EX there for the ability. Pheasant EX there for the ability. Chimpow there for the ability, right? So you see lots of Pokemon there for the ability. With the toolbox deck, you see lots of Pokemon there for attacks as well. If we pull up, and I'll pull up Ends. Sure, we'll pull up Enzoric EX. I'm trying to think of a quote normal deck that's you don't have these like kind of random Pokemon. It's always Dragon, which like and Zekrom is like kind of a weird card, and Enzresharm, because they don't do anything on their own. They only get copied. But regardless, you have Enzoric EX with a very good ability, obviously there for its attack, and also there for its ability. Like you see this card being well-rounded with powerful aspects in both areas there. Pokemon EX there mostly for the ability, can be used for the attack. You see, again, Fez for the ability, Monkidora for the ability. Right? We see these interesting Pokemon with interesting abilities, and you see some interesting attacking options as well. And the tag teams had interesting attacking options. I do want to mention most of the or some of the tag teams had three attacks there. This is cool. You look at Reshiram Charizard GX, a card I mentioned earlier, you have three interesting attacks useful in different situations. This is cool. So they have some interesting elements to them, but they just don't have abilities, which are probably the most interesting elements to cards. Also, some of these were kind of annoying, like Ingram Mimikyu, it's pretty annoying. But regardless, tag teams were overpowered. I will say Arceus Dalian Palkia GX. This card is sometimes overrated. This card was like when people talk about it, and how powerful it was good. It was um probably about as good as, I'm trying to think of like a deck. Obviously, there's not a deck in standard that's at the same power level of it. Dragapult is definitely better than ADP was. Um, yeah, I would say maybe it's close. It's honestly not that close. I'd say it's probably about as good as maybe Charizard EX was, a good deck, right? Certainly, a very good deck, a very, resilient deck. I'd actually say ADP is probably less resilient than Charizard. And then, very, very powerful at times. ADP was difficult to deal with, but I mean, this deck was good, and very, very powerful. Good isn't powerful, not super well designed. People also talked about it being bad for single prizers, and theoretically, three prizes are like rough for other decks to deal with. Again, because of the stuff I talked about at the beginning, but like you could just theoretically balance the cards, right? So ADP does, as well as other three prizes, were very powerful, pushing out other decks from the game. And then after this, they're followed up with Vmaxes. So Vmax Pokemon are all stage ones. Oh, tag games are all basics. I didn't say that earlier. Obviously, being basics makes them better, but also makes them less interesting. Now we have evolutions with Vmaxes, and these are also all the same stage. Okay, by the way, if you didn't know, Vmaxes are actually their own stage. They are not stage ones. Technically, they're essentially stage ones, but they technically aren't. So, yeah, that's a thing there that I guess is worth mentioning. And so these cards here are the stage of VMAXs, essentially stage ones, evolve from two prize basics, though, Pokemon Vs. And they are, again, three prizers. So they increase by one prize, which is the same as standard EXs, not standard Mega EXs, but standard not Mega EXs. And that is okay, meaning that there is some quote downside to evolving them in terms of giving up another prize. When you look at power level in terms of HP, the HP levels are going to be, I think, similar to the HP of like standard stage one megas. I actually, when the first set of megas from Mega Evolution were revealed, I actually compared a lot of them to VMAXs very directly. This with these cards though, if we look at having abilities, again that is important. Some had abilities. I'm trying to think of ones with good, interesting abilities. There was technically Rayquaza VMAX. Rayquaza VMAX was kind of bad though. It was very hyped up and ended up being just like not good. But regardless, it has a somewhat interesting ability. Discard your hand, draw three every turn is okay. You have some pinging abilities, some buffing abilities, some like energy acceleration stuff. Also, I always think this card is Orbital VMAX. It's not. It's Deoxys VMAX. It's as much Deoxys as Orbital on the card. But you have different abilities that do something. I mean, you have some stuff here, but it's somewhat mediocre is what I'd say. You look at Shadow Arc Calyx VMAX, Umbreon VMAX, and Teleon VMAX. These all are okay, pretty decent abilities. But when you're looking at when you look at the best abilities in standard, right, for the most part, most of them are on basics. Well, the best cards with abilities. Obviously, having a higher evolution means you need to have a stronger ability. You look at like Latias EX, Monkey Dory. You look at, even Pekron EX, which we saw earlier. Can look at Meowth EX, Mega Kangaskhan EX, and cards that are basics with abilities are often pretty solid. As long as the ability is like okay, there's a reason to use it. It's definitely interesting. I think basics with abilities are some of the most interesting cards in the game because you can tech them into decks really easily. Having evolutions now, you need two different cards. You need to kind of set it up, and so the bar for playing this card, a card like this, is a bit higher. Unlike the tag teams, you could tech into decks. VMAXs are difficult to tech into decks. You'd be running one or two different VMAXs, maybe. Certainly, there are lots of decks not running despite having some pretty solid abilities on them. And then we look at a lot of the other ones. If I just look at the competitive ones, which are pretty solid reflection of the cards in general. Also, do want to say there were technically 3 years of VMAXs. There was only 1 year of tag teams, or 1 year in Japan of tag teams. With the VMAXs, there were essentially 2 years. They were technically printed in the third year, but they were pretty bad and pretty irrelevant. But looking at these, most of them just have one attack. Also, who played this card? But most of these have one attack, and that's a lot more boring than the 2 to 3 attacks on the tag teams. There aren't many super interesting decisions to make with them. And honestly, a lot of them are not very interesting attacks either. You look at, I'll just take Leafeon VMAX. Leafeon VMAX is not a terribly designed card. You look at it, this has two attacks, and there's something interesting to be said with these two attacks. The one is 170 heal, 30 from it, not super good, but something you'd use at times, which is fine enough, I suppose. And then you have Grass Knot, which is 60 more for each cost in your opponent's active Pokemon's retreat cost. So somewhat interesting there. You pair this with some ways to increase the retreat cost, but ultimately not crazy interesting. Theoretically, it's an interesting-ish concept, but it kind of just felt like this card you'd get 2 energy on and swing for big damage, probably two-shotting other VMAXs and one-shotting other Pokemon, and that's it. And there were a lot of different VMAXs like that. Even Mew VMAX, a legitimately amazing deck and a good card, is doing something similar. Probably not taking big one-shots on VMAXs technically could, but it was pretty hard to do. And then you see that you're going for two-shotting. Technically, you have different attack options to use in a similar vein to Ensoric EX, but you'd really just use one main attack there and just, swing in with Mew VMAX for something that was shockingly boring. There were interesting things that could do, but they weren't really about Mew VMAX. Again, technically it's a toolbox attacker, but only technically, or in practicality, it wasn't really that. So this was true for most of the Vmaxes. You have a Turnus Vmax, just 2 energy, big damage. You have, let's see, there's some other ones. I mean, Sylveon Vmax was 2 energy attachments, big damage. There were some that were spread, like Italian VMAX and Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX. There was also Flying Pikachu VMAX, which was kind of funny. Mostly funny because of, I mean, it's Flying Pikachu, right? Like, this card's super goofy, and how it looks, and how it played was, I mean, it's not that goofy. Um, it was fine. It was a counter option, essentially, was mostly what it was. So you had some different cards that did some kind of different stuff, but in terms of the level that you're looking for interest, it didn't really, I wouldn't say, quite get there. Then with Vmaxes, yeah, I could dive more into them. This is the mechanic that was explored the most, outside of, I guess, maybe Megas, but we'll see what happens. To this point, we've seen more from Vmaxes than Megas, I'm pretty sure. Let me actually just double check. It's pretty close though. So we're getting to a close point. And then we take a look at V unions. Also, VMAXs were like kind of overpowered at first as well. Or I don't know if overpowered is quite the right word, but they were at a similar power level to the um the tag teams, or it's just a higher power level, but I'd say a similar difference between them and then, I mean, the two prizes at this time were okay, but they certainly weren't that impressive. I mean, Zacian V was very good, but other than that, I don't think they were particularly impressive. So you saw the VMAX is kind of pushing out the two prizers and single prizers, certainly the single prizers, but also somewhat the two prizers there. And it was a similar thing to the tag teams. And I will say, this is a big reason why people were scared of the megas. And I think why Pokemon was scared of the megas as well, the three prize megas. They didn't want to repeat this era of 3 to 4 years where we just had these three prizes really dominating the game. As time kind of went on, Pokemon managed to print some interesting two prizes with the use of V Stars, which were kind of like V Maxes, but not the same, and have those be good, and they need to kind of increase the power level a little bit, but nothing crazy there, I wouldn't say. And then we also saw, I mean, we'll talk about current card design as well, as we get there later on in the video, and like as we get to the end of that. But with the Vmaxes, they weren't super interesting, and they pushed other stuff out of the game for the most part in a similar way to the tag teams, except that they weren't as interesting as the tag teams. So I'd say both the tag teams and the Vmaxes failed as a mechanic. I don't despise them or anything like that, but I certainly don't love them, and I know a lot of people really dislike them there. Then we'll talk about the V unions. The V unions are, I mean, they're bad. I'm not gonna lie. They're just not good. How are they classified here? I don't know how Limitless does it. Here they are. So these are cards, if you're familiar with, I mean, you might be familiar with the Reunions, but if you've been familiar, Rise, with the new cards from the next expansion, Storm Marauder / Delta Rain, you see these stadiums that kind of combine, but you play two copies of them. With the Reunions, you need to play all four. They actually all need to be in the discard as well. I don't really know why it's the case. And then if they get knocked out, then you can't actually get them back again because you just can't. That's what the rule is. They are three prizers. They aren't evolutions or basics. I guess the only other Pokemon that aren't evolutions are basics are um I guess Pokemon Legends aren't, right? Are level like X Pokemon, are those evolutions? I don't know if they're actually evolutions either, but regardless, they were bizarrely like very hard to search. They were not very good. Mewtwo Union was okay, but mostly due to one being this like a weird control card, and two having synergy with Gardevoir EX, which is very good. So ultimately, they're kind of bad. They're really hard to play. They also, again, don't have interesting abilities here. Funnily enough, Green Ninja Union has three. This one has an ability that says it's immune to effects of item cards, which is not very meaningful. This one can't be poisoned, this part. And then this one says this is the only ability you actually choose to use. Once during your turn, you can have your opponent reveal their hand. These pretty much do like nothing, right? Let's be honest. So that's unfortunate, but yeah, they're very nothing abilities, like shockingly nothing abilities. And then the Mewtwo has one, which is actually okay, being immune to effects of attacks, but it's fine, and we see it all the time. And then none of the other ones actually have any abilities, so that is something. I don't really know what to say about this here. Like, they have these attacks. They're pretty mediocre. Theoretically, their attacks are good, and then their like their HP is lower than Vmax's. Their attacks are better, but are they actually better? I don't really know, to be honest. I mean, ultimately, you can look at some like this is like this big item lock attack. But they're like impossible to get and play it into play. Essentially, there was some synergies. Actually, funnily enough, and expanded, they're kind of cool, but I never actually had those pieces in standard, so it didn't really matter. There, I guess Pikachu Union in expanded is like something that's worth mentioning. Maybe I don't know, but overall, they're kind of not it, right? They are a bit of an afterthought. They also are, by the way, we're not in packs because who wants to pull like a piece of card? Although oops, not that. Although with the new expansion, you will pull a piece of card, which I think is going to be kind of sick. But regardless, Vegan's kind of bad. Then we come to the modern megas. The modern megas are power level wise okay, but if you've paid attention to the standard format metagame, like really at all within the past what year, maybe not quite year, the Dragapult's been very good. And I was actually originally going to make a video talking about how Dragapult, I was like, is it a problem? Is it not a problem? I don't know. But a big part of it is these three prizers just aren't very good, and the cards being pushed, the two prizers from the Mega era are not good, other than, I guess, Meowth is good, but it's a support Pokemon, and maybe some others that are okay. Then you look at these single parsers. These single parsers are actually okay. I'd say Pokemon has done a solid job with single parsers, but they really wanted to make sure that the metagame has not been focused around these three parsers, which is okay, but they balance the cards okay. I've heard some people say that reversing the power creep here is good. I mean, again, they've with the last two iterations of the three prizers, obviously mostly megas, not so much the Venians because there isn't too much to say about them or to play with them, I suppose. But yeah, they made sure to make the repressors not too powerful. And power level wise, I think it would have been better if they were a little stronger, certainly, because again, Dragon Ball's been very good. And when you look at the meta game, when you look at let's see, the top decks of the past, what I'll say past 6 months seems fine enough. We split it, or no, so we don't split into archetypes. We see that the top mega is I can't believe Gardevoir 2. The top mega is there's Mega Absol Box, which had some. Yeah, it's a bit of a weird deck. It has some megas which are meaningful. Mega Absol EX, I will say, is a good support card, but in terms of attackers, Mega Absol EX is fine, but I mean it's not that impressive. And then we see the next mega is Mega Lopunny. Like Mega Lopunny just isn't that good. I mean it's okay, but it's not a very impressive card. And we take a look at the megas. Most of them aren't that interesting or that good. Um, most don't really have abilities. The best one by far is Mega Kangaskhan EXs. I'm trying to think of the other ones. Let's see. So we see Mega Grunge EX's ability is kind of cool. Mega Mega what is it? Mega Venusaur is something, I guess. That's like kind of worth mentioning. And maybe Mega Chandelure, maybe Mega Gengar. I've heard some talk about that, but so we don't see these very interesting support Pokemon other than Mega Kangaskhan EX, which I think is an interesting support Pokemon there as a basic, right? Again, having basics, which we do see the stages being, regular stages, which some people complain about thematically, which is fair. Gameplay wise, I think it's cool having reasons to play them or not play them. And to be honest, if we have these Pokemon, like a Mega Venusaur that evolves from Venusaur, that's like super bad. A Pokemon that's like a stage 3, that's super rough and creates very swingy games. We had Greninja Break being that, and that was pretty rough, I'm not gonna lie. So I think that the way they've done evolutions is good. Having some as basics. Again, basics are most of the more interesting Pokemon in the TCG, but the attacks to these cards just aren't that interesting, I don't think. I mean, they're not horrible, but they're somewhat uninteresting and they're somewhat weak as well. Again, I think the idea of reversing power creep there is an interesting idea. I don't know if it's the best idea, but it is an idea that is worth considering. But they need to make the cards interesting, and I'd say most of them are less interesting than Dragapult EX as well. Dragapult EX is very good and has some interesting play patterns. You have spread, which is somewhat interesting. It's not like crazy spread though. You have solid active damage. You have some decision making with searching through your, or not searching through your deck, but like digging through your deck with Drake Look there. You look at the megas, and they're not quite as interesting as Dragon Ball EX. And Dragon Ball EX isn't some crazy interesting Pokemon either, but maybe I'm off base with this. Maybe the Megas are actually just like really interesting, and I'm just being a bit of a hater. So tell me your thoughts on that in the comment section if you think I am wrong on this stuff, because I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And I do think in terms of the three prizes and the Megas, obviously just make more interesting support cards. This is true in general. Most Pokemon don't have abilities, and abilities are very important in the TCG. They are how Pokemon, most of your Pokemon in play can't attack, right? One can attack every turn, and the rest can all use abilities, right? The rest can all use abilities. Theoretically, you can be setting up for attacks in the future, but most of them are there for just abilities, and so having more Pokemon that are able to do that, that's really important. I mean, we've seen like Enzoric EX being a Pokemon with an ability that's a two prizer. Even with two prizes, though, for the most part, they're not these ability Pokemon. There's some basics. That's not uncommon. We usually have a few a year, I'd say. You see like Meowth, you see Pheasantipity, you see Latias being these two prize basic EXs that are very good, but I don't know, they just have a long ways to go, I think. Well, not necessarily a long ways to go. They could just slap interesting abilities on them. But for some reason, it feels like they're a long ways away, where the Megas and the Mega sets have not been that interesting. Pitch Black has been interesting, I will say, but not really because of the Megas. But tell me your thoughts in the comment section. Also, huge shout out to my YouTube members for supporting the channel, but also everyone else who just likes and subscribes. It's free, you can do it, and that's really fun, and I really appreciate it. So I'd love it if you do that. But I hope you all enjoyed, and as always, I'm excited to see you in the next video.